Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being your show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Once Upon a Time. Another fantastic episode. There is so much stuff that went down in this episode that's so cool, but we're just going to break everything down piece by piece. For one, obviously, it's bouncing back and forth between, like, obviously, you get a little bit of, like, Henry training with, Killian, like, you know, obviously back in Storybrooke, like, before he ended up leaving and everything. Obviously, this is, like, you know, Emma's work, because it's like, oh, you know, Henry's going to want to go out on his own. And, you know, it's like, I miss so much of his life, and it's like, you know, typical mom things. And it's just a sweet moment. And obviously, that plays into the episode. I'm going to be bouncing all around the episode. Like, first of all, I was so worried because they're like, oh yeah, it's like, because, you know, you have later on Regina be like, oh, dude, you're not going to tell him the truth about Emma. I was like, what? Is Emma sick or something? He's out there talking about she's fighting. What? No, it's like, no, because Emma said, like, she doesn't want him to know so he can get on. I was like, what is, I was like, is she sick? What is that? It's like, no, she's pregnant. I'm like, what? That's so cool. Henry's going to have, a new sibling, which, you know, I think one of the reasons why is also because it's like, well, because if he found out immediately, he'd want to come back home and everything. I'm like, oh my God, like, I'm here to help you, Mom, like, with this whole thing. It's like, he's got his own story to kind of go out there and find and everything. Like, Emma has her story that she went out and it found, yes, with a little help from Henry, but, you know, eventually her story became what it is. And, you know, so it's like time for Henry to go out and find his. But it's just, I think that's also maybe on some other level, I don't know, because I was thinking it was something, because like everyone kept dodging it, especially Regina. I did like little nods here and there about Granny. Also the one about Archie, I really appreciate that, being like, yeah, basically because everyone's got happy endings, no one's going to see Archie anymore, because it's like, you don't really need like a conscience, you know, when everything's good in Storybrooke. But then it's like, well, he's kind of going to upswing of things because of like all the weddings and stuff that are happening. And obviously the Charmings are still as sickeningly happy as they've always been. So it was also cool because it does seem like Regina hasn't seen, like, obviously when you put it in a time frame, obviously they're very vague about how much time has passed. But I say roughly like it's been like 10 years in between like season 6's, you know, everything ending with the Black Fairy till now, like an older Henry. I'm thinking roughly 10 years. Maybe it's probably more like 12 or 13, whatever the case may be. They're very vague with the time frame and everything. But it seems like she probably hasn't seen him in all that time because she's like, oh my God, look at you. You're so grown up and everything. Obviously in the context, like outside of the story and everything, and, you know, it's a sweet little nod because it's like, oh yeah, this is our first time being technically on screen together. Like obviously being themselves, her being Regina, him being Henry, like that whole situation. So technically this is the first time being on screen together. So there's that and everything. So, God, so much stuff went down in this episode. Okay. What really took me by surprise is the whole Killian story. I thought that was kind of interesting. I was like, oh, who's this guy approaching Killian? And it's like, oh, it's Killian from the other, like, time, the other world that the evil queen wished up, last season. That was so interesting to me because it's like, it's not like that world doesn't exist anymore. It's almost like a parallel universe. Like, I mean, obviously we're in this realm that has its own Cinderella, even though we know Cinderella back in Storybrooke. It's just like, there's different realms. So that's kind of a realm all of it. So it was created by a wish, but it still exists. So it was just kind of interesting that he's back, which does beg the question, like, who else from that world are we going to see? I mean, I think I vaguely remember seeing in the trailers that the evil queen was in it, so I'm not too surprised, like, if she pops up. But that's so interesting, and the fact of the matter is he's here because basically his life is like, what if everything that, like, even though all that bad stuff happened, all that bad stuff led to where the series is now, like Emma and Killian meeting. Like, if it wasn't for Emma being in his life, Killian wouldn't be the man that he is now, and he'd be the person that, and I'm going to differentiate them by being like Hook. Hook is going to be the alternate world Killian, and Killian is going to be the Killian that we've come to know this entire time. So Hook, you know, it's all the stuff that would have happened to Killian if he had never met Emma. And so basically all this is about him having happiness and, you know, him trying to get happiness and whatnot. So he's trying to steal Killian's life essentially, which is kind of interesting because he met up with Victoria, but it seems like they knew each other. At first I was like, whoa, is she confusing him for the other Killian? And it's like, no, she knows this specific Hook. You know, I was like, oh, so it's like they crossed paths at one point in time. But I'm like, well, let's not forget, like, it's not like Killian has traveled to different worlds at different points in time. So let's not forget the whole, like, going to Neverland and everything. So it's not like traveling to different worlds, even if that in itself is a different world, you know, in that wished up world, there's still, like, you know, Like, I'm curious because there's still that angle of like there's that other Henry that's out there super pissed about like his like, which actually makes that whole situation even sadder because even though that world is kind of made up, it was made created by Wish. It's still a real world, so it's kind of sad when you actually think about it because it's like Regina killed kind of her, arguably like her, her family, when she killed Snow White and Prince Charming in that world, just to kind of push Emma to kind of wake up from her. So I mean, when you actually break it down and think about it too hard, it's like that's kind of depressing. And he was all for it and everything. He was going to play along. He kind of made Henry doubt the whole like him and Cinderella thing, even though he thought there was something there. Which I'll kind of get to that in a second, but I'm going to finish my thought. What I thought was so incredible was the fact of the matter is he second guessed himself. He had to turn around. I was like, wait, this is another person from that world that had to turn around. Obviously the first one being the evil queen, but now him. And he went back to help kill him, but he ended up, they struggled and he ended up stabbing himself. It seems like the reason why he didn't want to like do that is because he found out about Killian being a dad, and a dad shouldn't be, he didn't want to come between a dad and his child because he knows what that's like because he has a daughter, which is like, whoa, I mean, it is an alternate reality, so things worked out differently. I mean, I am curious, like, who's the mom in that case? They are giving you context clues to who his daughter is, but it's like, there's a chess piece, she has like the knight piece, and he has like the rook, so I don't know. I'm curious to find out more about that particular situation. I thought that was fascinating. But what really got me was the fact of the matter is when it's all said and done, the Rogers that's in Hyperion, or is it Hyperion? I think it's Hyperion. I think in the first episode I referred to it as Hyperion, but I think it's pronounced Hyperion Heights. That's Hook from the alternate reality. That's not the Killian we've come to know. And I'm like, that's so great because he's stuck looking like Killian. I was like, that's so good because it makes that whole situation even more interesting. And the fact of the matter is, he's looking at Emma, like he's seeing the pictures of her, and he's asking Henry, like, who is she? Now she's got to be someone real because I feel like I know her, I've met her before. And it's like you see him throughout this episode struggling with the darkness in them. I was like, oh man, that's kind of sad that Killian took that step back. I was like, in my mind, I'm like, okay, it kind of makes sense because it's like obviously you have Hook, the alternate world Hook, and now you have Killian, and it's like, oh, obviously they represent the duality of like, oh, where his life could have, the different paths his life could have taken. But it's like, no, like who he is in Hyperion Heights isn't some representation of that. It's actually the alternate world. I was like, that's so cool because Killian went back to Storybrooke with Emma, and it's like, oh my god, this isn't even the Killian we know. I mean, granted, he shares some of the memories, sure, but it's not the one we know, so his memories are very, I was like, that's so good, which then immediately my brain goes, is the Ronnie that we know as Regina, is that really Regina? I mean, obviously, storyline elements kind of make it like, oh yeah, that's Regina, but it's like, there's always a possibility because we know that the evil queen exists, so it's like, there's always a possibility that that's actually the evil queen and not really Regina, so I'm wondering about that, because I obviously get to it, but it's like, that's so cool that all three of them are traveling. I'm like, yes! He has his own, like, team. It's him and Hook / Killian, and Regina, which is definitely going to be interesting considering the fact is, it's like, yeah, like this entire time Henry's just been off on his own adventures and stuff, but now he's got one of his moms with him being like, I'm just curious, like, whoa, Henry, is this how you've been handling things without me around? I can't wait for it. It's going to be so cool because they've never really, like, even throughout this series, like, they've been part of things together, obviously, but I feel like this is their first time really being on a big adventure together. I'm trying to think, I don't think they've ever really been on like a big, like, obviously there's been situations like, Neverland about saving Henry and stuff, sure, but it's like, this is like the first time it's like, oh, together, side by side, we're on a quest of our own. He refers to as Operation Next Chapter. I'm like, that's so cool. Especially because obviously, like, they're a team together. Like, obviously, like, the show has always done that beautiful thing of like, oh, here's the past. And now you see the past kind of being reflected, even in this current circumstances, that even under a curse, that the fact of the matter is what is true about these people's nature will come true. So they were kind of a team already, like, obviously in the past. And it's like, even under this curse, they're coming together. You have like, because Killian wants to investigate Victoria, and Ronnie has like the connections to people who are being, blackmailed or being like corrupted or pushed by, Victoria, and Henry being a writer can write up stories to kind of an expose essentially. So it's like all three of them working together, and I'm like, that's so cool. Especially because like it's because it's so interesting, kind of going back to what I was bringing up about the whole Killian situation. Hook situation. Like I said, I'm gonna have to. I don't know. I might have to call it like alternate Killian. I might have to just simply refer to him as that, or alternate Hook, whatever the case may be. The entire episode, you had like Weaver, Rumple, telling him like, "Oh, do this and do that," essentially. And I'm not too surprised. It turns out he's actually working for Victoria. Which even then, he's kind of like, "I don't actually work for you. The reason why we're working together is because our goals align. Like, don't forget that can change at any moment in time. Like, I don't work for you. You don't own me. So, I mean, to be expected because Rumple is Rumple. Can't control the Dark One. But like I said, it is seeming like we are possibly getting cuts and pieces of like that in between. Like I'm sure like going forward, we're going to be seeing like I said, other Killian and Henry and Regina on adventures and stuff like that when it comes to Cinderella, tracking her down and everything, dealing with Victoria. Like I said, it's actually kind of interesting because now we have Regina under a curse that even she didn't start. Because let's not forget, she started the original curse. Which then another curse. I mean, technically it's been two curses because there's the whole like rewrite Isaac did. So that she was under that curse as well. And then there was the one made by the Black Fairy at the end of the seasons, last season. So this isn't like her first time under a curse per se. So it's just kind of interesting, especially, you know, it's like the whole full circle thing. She started a curse and now she's being like under someone else's curse, which it seems like Victoria is at the heart of it. Like I mean, she doesn't really have magic. I mean, granted, she does have the fairy godmother's wand. Which still, that even thinking back to it, I'm like, that's so brutal. Like, what's Cinderella going to do? Like, her fairy godmother is going, not unless someone else is going to fill that role going forward. But I mean, we'll just kind of have to see. I'm curious to see like where they all like ended up in this whole situation, because the last time we heard about Rumple, the last episode was from Alice, which I'm sure we're going to bump into her from time to time in this. Is the fact that she's kind of like Rumple's eyes and ears on keeping an eye on Henry. Really quickly, just something I was about to bring up earlier. I say it last episode, I was like, I didn't know why the actress who plays Victoria's daughter, you know, like kind of slash her secretary in Hyperion Heights, but I was like, why she looks so familiar? I happened to see a name in the opening credits, I'm like, and it said Adeline Kane, and I was like, why does that name sound so familiar? And it's like from the like CW series Reign, which ended this year, and I was like, right, I'm looking at her face, I'm like, right, that's where I recognize you from. I never watched the show, but it's like I caught glimpses of stuff. I was like, that's where that obviously. I was like, that's where that's what that all comes out to. Side note, too, kind of coinciding with that is Yacinda's friend. I won't spoil it because I think that's who she's supposed to be. Like recently, someone kind of brought some stuff to my attention about some of the like characters we'll see in this season. And one character in particular popped up, and I was like, right, because I know her friend has to be someone because she was in a dress and everything. She's kind of like a princess or whatever at the like ball when Cinderella met with the prince and everything. I was like, right. So obviously, to anyone that's curious, I won't, you know, who wants to avoid it, I won't say what story she's from. But I was like, right, that makes sense because said story she's from has not popped up in Once Upon a Time yet. So it's like, it's actually surprising. It's like, right. And that said person also mentioned like there's another character, another obviously Disney property, obviously that's going to be tackled as well. But I'll keep that to myself. So there's not. Now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, there's no way that setting like there's no way that I'm sitting here thinking that person can't be the one related to Hook. That can't be his daughter. Who's going to be his daughter then? I'm so curious. You don't think it's like Otherworld Alice, is it? It can't be, right? I don't know. Like, God, there's so many possibilities. I feel like it's gonna be someone we're gonna get familiar with in this season, possibly, because it's obviously like much like the original Curse 2, like there's elements of like their stories being mixed in, kind of like it's kind of like everything is kind of being shoved in there like very poorly. Hence why, like, you know, certain things about Henry's situation aren't making sense because the glamour's kind of falling apart because he's like he couldn't find out where the people that are important to him were buried in the whole daughter situation, which he does have one that, I mean, but we know that it's Lucy, so I don't know. But they really stepped up. The fact of the matter is they're trying to do whatever they can to try. Like, because I did like that moment. Like, you could feel that the other Killian was going to have that moment of like, that. I was curious to see whether he actually go through it or not, like framing Henry. But the fact of the matter is he didn't. Obviously being drawn to a keychain that had a swan on it. So obviously, it's kind of sad because everything he did was because he was trying to track down his daughter, like being like, and being with Emma, he thought if he found his true love, then maybe like being with Emma would ultimately help him find his daughter. So it was for selfish reasons, but at the same time very selfless. But now he knows that's not the right way to go about it. There's always a possibility of finding a new love of his own. So it might be an opportunity for Regina too. I mean, because it's something Henry kind of puts together too. It's like, yeah, she still has her story too, because like her happily ever after still hasn't completely set in. But it also seems like Henry and Jacinda are on good terms after this episode. Him helping out with everything. Ended up getting a little bit of a bruise from Weaver elbowing him like that. And it's like, oh, that's got to sting. Also, when you actually think about it, it's like that's your grandson you just elbowed like that. That's kind of a little harsh, but still. I was also thinking something earlier, kind of concerning the whole Killian and Henry situation. It's weird when you actually think about it, because obviously, like, Killian is like his stepdad, but now he's with the not stepdad Killian, and it's got to be weird. And he's there to kind of, Henry's more so there to kind of help guide Killian. It's like their goals can be one and the same. He's looking for Cinderella. Hook is looking for his daughter. And it's like Henry can show him the right way to handle things, to go about things. I mean, another thing really quickly too is I am curious, I guess this kind of sets up the fact is that, I guess it kind of like, something I was thinking about is, I guess this kind of makes sense too, like why it's not taking place in Storybrooke, because I guess for it to take place in Storybrooke, all this would have to be going down in the Enchanted Forest. But if a curse happened in the Enchanted Forest, does that mean it will always lead back to Storybrooke? I don't think it necessarily like works out like that, but it's just kind of interesting. Like obviously, it's like I said, I brought up in the premiere, it's like all a new setting and stuff like that. But it's like it kind of makes sense, like the circumstances being what they are, because they were in a different realm, most likely this other realm when this whole situation happened. So them getting cursed and everything. So I'm very, like I said, like fantastic episode. I'm so excited to see what goes down in the next episode with all of this. I brought this up in a season premiere. Like I am curious, will there be any cuts to Storybrooke? We got a tiny bit this episode, but I don't know if they'll really do that. There might be little stuff here and there. I feel like if anything, it has to be heavy plot relevance. Because the thing is, I don't know, like, Jennifer Morrison, the actress who plays Emma, I don't know her whole situation. I randomly saw something a while back that was kind of like had a thumbnail of her and said farewell. I don't know if that's like just someone just doing that as clickbaity, but it's like, I don't know if like with the way the story is tailored, like will she be like, she might pop up every once in a while, but she's probably not going to be the main protagonist like she was before, because obviously this is Henry's story. So it's kind of more of a situation of like now the narrative switched up and he's the main protagonist and she's kind of a side character in what is essentially his story. So obviously he's got his own group to kind of like of loved ones and people to kind of build around, so I mean, it kind of applies for the Charmings too. Like, I don't know if we'll actually see them that often this season. We might see them a little bit, but it's like I said, main focus of it is Henry's story, and obviously this is also going to involve Regina as well as other Killian as well, and Cinderella, and everyone. We're kind of, obviously Rumpel in some shape or form, mainly Victoria. I think out of anyone that's probably going to have the hardest turnaround is probably going to be Victoria's daughter, just because like even Henry kind of tackled it a little bit, being like, hey, you're not as bad as her, and she's like, you're wrong. It's like when her mom brought up like, oh yeah, find out where the slipper is and then kill him, and you saw a look on her face. It's like she isn't 100% down with everything that her mom does. She's just kind of, I mean, we'll probably find out more about why she's so obedient to her mom. Maybe it's like just the nature of things. Maybe she's entitled. Maybe she's just kind of a victim herself in this whole circumstance. I think what we'll be seeing going forward is her flip-flopping. Like, she'll have moments where she's good, but then you're kind of like, well, is she really good, or is she just being, like putting on a front to kind of lower someone's guard? Like I said, we will just have to wait and see what goes down in the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.